What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and this one I want to talk about what's going on with the overall market and break down how the technicals are looking for SPY, Tesla, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of tickers out there. I'm going to break down how on earth the overall market sentiment is looking, what news just came out that's very important, and how this week may look for the overall market. But before I do anything like this, let me just mention a couple of things. I'm firstly not a financial planner, so make sure you take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks with a $50 cash reward. The offer ends in just about 11 days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. All right, so SPY was up 0.05% for the day on Friday, and the question is, will the market try to continue to bounce, or will the market see some more downside? I'm going to answer this question by doing some technical analysis and breaking down some important things. So right now, the market keeps on talking about how the yields are inverting, they're pushing up quite a bit, especially the 10-year treasury yield. With all of this going on, this tends to be negative for the markets. The market is just getting hit with all this negative news about how we're going to crash. Michael Burry is like shorting the market very hard. And could that be the truth? Well, sure, it is always a possibility. I wouldn't necessarily rule it out. But let me just mention that all of a sudden, the market is just going crazy over all of this. And this makes me suspect that there could be a bounce, so something completely the opposite that happens that throws off so many investors. Now, is it a guaranteed bounce that's going to last forever? The answer is no. I'm not saying that whatsoever. Because on SPX, we could see something like this, a very small temporary bounce for a head and shoulders like pattern. This is what SPX looks like. We're actually hitting this demand zone right now on the overall indices, not to mention, on SPY, we have a similar formation. But with SPY tracking this, we had a possible left shoulder ahead forming on SPX, and we could be forming a right shoulder, getting this temporary bounce right here, just very, very temporarily, nothing too crazy before more potential downside that is still on the table, right? And I just want to make this as clear as possible. I'm not calling for a crazy bounce back to like all-time highs or anything like that. It's just a technical bounce that's very possible before we see any more downside. Now, if this ends up failing, if we end up breaking below this support, we could just come all the way back down to like, the 4250s all the way down here first off before any balance, but I'm not really counting on that. Based off the divergences and all these external factors, I do think the odds favor a very temporary bounce as soon as Monday. And one of the reasons for that is going to be Nvidia. Nvidia has earnings coming out for Wednesday, and there's going to be a lot of hype associated with this. I think that a lot of investors may try to push this share price up, especially when you look at the chart on it. The odds do greatly favor that, so we're going to be watching this very carefully. There tends to be lots of hype associated with this stock and informations and all the hype around its earnings and things like that. Now, looking at some data, let me just be frank, there's not really any major piece of data coming out for tomorrow, but we do have some Fed speakers and other manufacturing shipment indexes and all this data coming out for Tuesday. For Wednesday, we have I think the first Jackson Hole event, but I don't think Powell's going to be speaking at the first one. But we do have the PMI reports coming out. And then between Thursday and Friday, one of those days, I think Jerome Powell will be speaking. I know he's going to be speaking on Friday. And with Powell speaking to end the week, it may not be very pretty for investors as the Fed has been quite hawkish as of recent. So everyone has to be prepared for this. This could be very, very huge. This could lead to a big rug pull for the end of the week. And that kind of aligns with this chart right here, how we could get this temporary bounce. Maybe it's kind of like this for the right shoulder before we start to see downside afterwards as soon as the end of the week. That's kind of like the direction I'm leaning towards. And I will break this down more in just a few minutes. As far as the fear and greed index goes, here's what's interesting. We're just about to get to the fearful part. Are we about to just see this thing, straight up go to fear with some capitulation, things like that with bad news? It's possible. It really is possible. Or right as we're about to hit the fear side, are we about to get a temporary bounce to throw off investors before we see anything like that and any changes? That's also another possibility. And we're just about to hit fear. So we'll see if this leads us to just straight up tank or if we get a temporary bounce before that ends up happening. Now, other indicators are becoming less and less greedy. Market momentum is slowing down right now. less in favor of the greed, and we're getting closer to our 125-day moving average. The stock price strength index is dropping. Same thing with these other indicators. The puts, excuse me, to call options are positioned in a more fearful way as they're favoring the puts a lot more in this market. And market volatility, looking at the VIX, is still favoring extremely fearful levels. Now, looking at some charts, I want to break down Nvidia and just a couple of others real quick. Nvidia and Apple are going to be two big ones to watch for the week, and here's exactly why. When we zoom out of Nvidia, I'm going to actually delete this just to be simple and unbiased. This thing has a really nice flag that's forming that could lead to some really bullish outcomes, and I just think that it's very interesting to witness. In my opinion, it's not looking too bad. I really believe that this channel right here is holding up quite nicely, and if this ends up continuing to hold up, we could see a breakout in one of these directions, probably the upside right approaching its earnings, because this is forming a very, very nice flag. Now, if we get that breakout, the expected move, or at least the full measured move, would take this thing all the way up to the 460s, right? Almost 470 actually. That's the full on measured move, but those don't always play out perfectly. What I'm thinking is, with this flag forming, if we do get the breakout, we could see Nvidia start pushing for 442 plus. And I'm going to be watching this on a level to level basis. So then once we break that, you're going to be watching, could we break this high right here, 446 and 452 above that? And if we do get above all these levels, I'm going to be watching the 460s, if not 462, followed by potentially even 470. That's another possibility. But I'm just trying to make it clear, Nvidia has potential to get a bounce approaching its earnings. And there might be a lot of hype, a lot of FOMO buying into it because a lot of investors are thinking that it might continue to pump. All the news that's coming out on Nvidia is, for the most part, bullish news, these new targets on it, analysts saying it's going to $600, $800, and all these crazy things. Now, with all this positive news coming out right before earnings, it makes me suspect, is it really going to pump after earnings come out, or is it going to do the opposite, right? Not too sure. Anything could happen. It could also come down after earnings. But approaching its earnings, it might start pumping right approaching earnings. And then after earnings, who knows what's going to happen? It could tank anyways. And that would drag the whole market with it. Now, something else that's worth noting would be let me just talk about SPY, just a few others on the TradingView charts. In my opinion, SPY is looking quite decent too because it formed a nice inverse head and shoulder structure right about here. And it's actually going to be testing this resistance right here. Now, I see two possibilities that are very probable. I do believe it's going to bounce, just a temporary bounce. Not saying it's going to be that crazy, that huge, but it could come down to 431 and then get the bounce, right? That's one possibility if we get a really bad piece of news tomorrow before getting the bounce. Or with this very nice volume and the algo starts shifting as soon as on Friday, if the algos stay the way they shift on Friday, if they continue to buy aggressively like how they did, look at this nice volume we got too, there's a good chance and the more probable possibility that we're forming this slanted inverse head and shoulders. And we're going to see, thanks to Nvidia and Apple trying to pump, SPY and SPX are going to be once again pushing up, and we're going to see SPY make its way back up to 440 or so, just for a temporary pop. Once again, I'm not saying it's going to go to all-time highs or squeeze or anything like that crazy, but I'm saying this because first off, we had a green day on Friday. We're getting some reversal signals, and the algos, right, the robots dictating the market, right, they are starting to turn bullish. There was a lot of signs of that on Friday. If it maintains for Monday, it could continue. Now, it depends on the news and other factors if we do end up getting that drop to 431 before the bounce, or if we just bounce from here. But I do believe the odds favor this thing bouncing right now. I think we have a nice trend that could be showing us this. So we want to break above this resistance, especially for tomorrow. If you see SPY break above the resistance line at 436, you're going to be watching 438 as the next resistance zone. If it breaks this, it's going to fly for 440 plus, in my opinion. And that's going to be our bounce. It could even go all the way up to 442 if that breaks, and 444 is a possibility for Wednesday. With Nvidia pumping, possibly, and also Apple, I think there's a good chance of this potentially playing out. And I think the odds favor this. But remember, it could always reverse later on after Nvidia's earnings or after Jerome Powell's speech at the end of the week. Okay, so a temporary bounce is all I'm talking about. I think it's very possible. If we break below 434.8, you're going to be watching the low from what we saw on Friday. We also have this support line right here around this 432 area. So we could, come down to 432, then 431.5 before getting the bounce, but you want to watch which level it breaks in and watch your direction very, very carefully. For the QQQ, right? This is also looking kind of bouncy. Look at this nice inverse head and shoulder structure. I actually have the two possibilities mapped out here, right? None of these are saying it's going to keep going and going and going. It could just pump a little bit, then get a rejection thanks to Nvidia and other factors. But basically, this tells you everything. It could come down like this, back to about 355, and then get the bounce before it tanks lower. Could it drop a little bit lower? I mean, it's a possibility, depends on the news. But I think what's more probable would be this green line, right? This bounce right here, this nice inverse head and shoulders playing out, and this bounce and a push into the 360s before we get some kind of reversal after that. Maybe 365 could come first. I think that with Nvidia pumping and Apple pumping, there's a good chance of that playing out. For Tesla stock, how is Tesla looking? It looks pretty decent in my opinion. Also, just like SPX, SPY, this thing broke out of this resistance right here, this very, very tight resistance during the after hours. It's trying to pump. It actually pumped during the after hours. It might kind of like push down a little bit into open, hit like 215 again, 216, and then try to get a bounce. But you could see it's making an attempt to bounce right here. Or it doesn't really drop that much and it just tries to get back to this resistance. I think 221 is on the table. I think there's a chance of this thing potentially getting a bounce. Now, there's a nice inverse head and shoulder structure. We also formed a bullish divergence on it. I can show you that a little bit later. We got some nice bullish volume from the algos. The odds favor this thing trying to push back to at least 221 very soon, if not 225. But it's just a temporary bounce. I'm not saying it's going to last forever. There's also a possibility, which is less likely, but also possible technically, that if we get some really bad news, it comes down to like 210 and then the bounce comes. If that's the case, you want to watch 215, 212, 210, then look for a bounce, or it just bounces from here. I think what's most likely going to happen, okay, listen to me carefully, it's going to bounce from here, maybe like drop a little bit in the morning and then get a little bounce back to 221 plus. The chart looks more bullish than bearish, at least temporarily. And then everything could change by Wednesday or Thursday, depending on Powell's speech or Nvidia's earnings. So I want to be as honest as possible. Hopefully, this is as clear as possible. Looking at Apple stock, okay? This is going to be the last one I go over on TradingView before I like speed this up on Webull. Nice inverse head and shoulder structure. Could get a bounce. Could this thing come down like to like 173.7, maybe a little lower, 173 flat, and then get the bounce? That's also a possibility. But it looks like we're getting good volume. Apple has been very, very oversold and formed a bullish divergence. It looks like it wants to bounce and push all the way back up to these levels, at least retest this trend line. And then we could see it get closer to 180 before we get some kind of rejection and come down later on after like Jackson Hole, after Powell's speech or whatever. But I think there's going to be a bounce coming first to start off the week, and this could help the market as well. Okay, so that's what I'm leaning towards. Looking at SPY, I already talked about that. Also on the MACD, on the 4-hour, we're about to get a bullish cross on the PPO. Tesla's also getting very close to it, a bullish cross on the PPO, looking more bullish than bearish, looking like it's getting ready to bounce. Apple as well, it's actually about to get a bullish crossover right here and try to push to this like imbalance. It's going to be attracted like a magnet to 177 if it does continue to break out. If it gets above 175, 177 is going to be on the table. The odds do favor that. Same thing with the QQQ. Look at the MACD. It's about to get a crossover on the PPO. Nvidia, same thing. It's about to get a bullish crossover. Everything is trying to flip a little bit for a temporary bounce, in my opinion, but everything could change after Nvidia's earnings in Jackson Hole. Just want to be honest with everyone. For Microsoft stock, I'm going to go kind of faster through these guys. This looks like it wants to bounce, get back to about 318 plus. If that breaks, you're going to be watching 321. If it breaks down, you want to watch 315 as support, followed by 312. I think the odds favor this thing pushing above the 20 EMA and trying to bounce. It looks more bouncy, in my opinion. For AMD, okay, same thing. It looks like it's going to follow Nvidia. Could be forming an inverse head and shoulder structure. Could be forming. It has a nice potential. It's very, very over sold right over here at 101. I think this thing is going to try to make its way back up to 106 plus and potentially 109. The odds do favor that. If it does fail us, watch 101 as major support just to be safe. But I do think the odds favor upside for it. Same thing for Netflix. After coming down this hard, it actually hit 398. We're going to be looking for a bounce towards this imbalance at like 414. Could come down a little bit and get a very, very small little bounce before it comes down later on. I just want to note that that is very probable. For the NASDAQ, or on the 4-hour time frame, it's been selling off like crazy, but it actually tested the 200 EMA. If it breaks below this, we could see this thing slide into like 13,000 flat before trying to get a bounce. If it does bounce off the 200, if this truly is it, we could see this thing get close to about 13,500, which could push the market. So at least tech would be dictating that. Same thing with SPX. I showed you guys the right shoulder already. On the VIX, I just want to mention that this thing got this rejection right here, and it formed a bearish divergence. It formed a bearish divergence at 18. It looks like it might get a rejection, come back down to the 200 around this 16.3 area. We might see a small rejection on it before it bounces again. But I think it may cool off a little bit thanks to the market pumping. That's very probable. The dollar came down a little bit on Friday. If this thing is going to reject after forming this bearish divergence, you're going to be watching 103.32. If that breaks, it's going to come down closer to 103, which could be bullish for the markets. We also have a bearish cross in the PPO on the 4-hour time frame. The odds do favor a little bit more downside for the dollar, but it could bounce later on, just temporarily, some downside because the market could pump. On Coinbase, if this thing breaks below 71.70 is technically on the table. It is oversold, at least to some extent. So I'm going to be looking for it to try to get back to 76, but I think it's going to be a little slower than the market. For Google, you're going to be watching, can this divergence play out? Actually, I'm not really seeing a very strong divergence just yet, but can this thing get a bounce and get back above 128.5? If it manages to do so, you're going to be watching 129.5 and potentially 130 for a small bounce. But it might come down to like 126.5 before getting the bounce. You're going to be watching the 200 EMA on the 4-hour time frame just to be safe. The 10-year Treasury yield is about to get a bearish cross on the PPO. If that happens with this potential bearish divergence, let me just double check this. Yeah, I think there's a bearish divergence that could be forming. Actually, I'm not seeing it. So actually, there's no bearish divergence, but there is a possibility it cools off a little bit because we're about to get a bearish cross on the MACD. It could come down to 41.77, just a very small little drop on the 10-year, which could be bullish for the stock market. There's a possibility of this, so keep this in the back of your mind. And the last two for the day are going to be Amazon and Meta. We're about to get a bullish cross on the PPO. It actually held very close to our EMA right about here. I think it's on not the 2-hour, but maybe the daily. I think that's going to show it a little bit better. It came very close to where this previous support just happened to be, around this gap area. Going to be watching for a bounce on Amazon. I think there's a potential for it to try to bounce at least just a little bit, if anything. And if it does get that bounce, you're going to be watching it try to break above 134. If that breaks, watch it push up to about 135.8, very close to our 200 EMA. I say that because there's a possible inverse head and shoulders. It could be forming a cup and handle. And on top of that, I'm seeing a potential bullish wedge that's forming right here. There's this bullish wedge forming on it. The odds favor upside. I think it's more likely going to go back to the 135s. But if it comes down, you're going to be watching 132 as support, 131.15, and then 130. I don't think it's going to drop that low. Maybe a small little drop before it tries to push up for 135. I think the odds favor upside. Same thing with Meta. It dropped very, very hard, very, very oversold. It's forming a nice inverse head and shoulders. We could see this thing push up, but it needs to break above the 50 EMA. And on the 4-hour time frame, we need to see this thing break above these resistance levels and get above, once again, 285 for a push back to this 290 area, the 20 EMA. We're about to get a bullish cross in the PPR. We're getting closer to it after it's very, very oversold. So I do think the odds favor this thing getting back to about 290. But just to be safe, we're going to be watching this carefully because it is relatively weak compared to the market. All right. So that's what I have for this video. If it does break down, you have like 280 as support, but I think it's going to try to get closer to 290. Anyways, that's what I have for this video. Have a great day, everyone. Enjoy your Sunday. Remain calm, cool, and collected. Be open-minded to anything, as if there's bad news, the market could come down before getting the bounce. But I do think the odds favor a bounce coming to the market based off Apple and Nvidia, and we're going to be watching to see if levels break just to be safe. I hope this video was helpful. Have a great weekend. Remain calm, cool, and collected. And please remember, I am not a perma bull. I'm not saying the market's going to go up forever. I'm just talking about a temporary bounce based off what we're seeing on technicals and based off what's happening with Nvidia and Apple and also other stocks out there like SPX and the formations. Okay, so thank you for listening. Have a great day. Enjoy your Sunday weekend. Enjoy football, whatever it is you want to do. And please take care, everyone. I want the best for everyone. And also, my thoughts go out to everyone in California who could be suffering because of the hurricane that's approaching, Hurricane Hillary. Please take care and please stay safe, everyone. Do what you have to do, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you, and peace out.